kind of want to get out there and tell moms that if you're feeling like you've lost your identity, because it happened to me, I was an engineer before, it made more sense for me to be a stay-at-home mom. So I was like, oh, I lost what I was before, and I didn't feel very powerful at all. I felt extremely vulnerable. I felt like I didn't have an impact in the world. So I want to tell moms that if you're feeling like I can't change the world because I'm a mom and I'm busy, no, it's like you can change the world, especially because of that part of you.
What's up, Cynthia? Welcome to the Brave Bitches podcast. I am so happy you're here. I'm so glad we get to know each other a little bit today.
I'm thrilled. I'm just so excited that you had me on. Thanks.
Yes, of course. I'm loving the pink jacket, by the way. So cute. And
That's in honor of you. I thought that I needed to get in the mood a little bit.
yes,
Yeah.
that's like this is just random side thing. My goal of like the next couple years is to build more color into my closet because I feel like my personality is colorful, loves all that. And then, I look in and it's all gray, black, and white. I'm thinking, what the heck, girl? You're not showing your inner self. So I love to see people wearing bright colors. I think that's super fun. But before we dive in
here, so I need
yes, for sure. That's another thing about winter too. It's like you gotta bring some color, something in. There's like those old wives' tales about not wearing white after a certain time, and I'm like, why would you do that? Because you could bring some sunshine into your wardrobe. Why set rules on yourself?
No rules for us on this podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, anyone that is getting to know you would love to get to know more about you. Could you give me a little intro about kind of what you're about and what you're passionate about?
Sure. So my name is Cynthia Changyit Levin. My pronouns are she, her. I am talking to you from St. Louis, Missouri. I am the mom of 2 kids who are now in college, so I'm officially an empty nester this year. But the thing about me that most people I would like most people to know about me is that I'm an author and a speaker. My book is about motherhood and advocacy. I've been doing both of those things for about 20 years. They are very linked for me. My book is called From Changing Diapers to Changing the World. Here it is. Why Moms it's Why Moms Make Great Advocates and How to Get Started. So it's a lot of inspirational stories and really the most important part, I feel, is the back third of it, which is advocacy made easy, and it's concrete tips about how people can get engaged with Congress, because my passion is taking things that I'm very concerned about in the world, maternal child health, nutrition, things like that. It was things that my eyes were open to after I became a mom, and telling Congress how I feel about it, and finding out how we can help people, the most vulnerable people in the world, transform their lives and do it with dignity, and to help people make a better future for themselves and for us. It's linked to us, right? So I do this in a nonpartisan way that's all about relationships. I'm a big believer in relationships between volunteers, between family, but you can also have relationships with members of Congress and their staff. And that's just something that not a lot of people think about, but it can be such a powerful thing. So this is the book that I wish that I had 20 years ago when I was figuring out how to do it while I had a baby and a toddler, which is a really weird time to take on something new. But on the other hand, a really great time to take on something new, because moms reinvent themselves. You're something before you're a mom, and then you're in transition of like, what's the next phase? So I rolled that all in, and 20 years later, it's still what I want to do.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's so powerful. I feel like there's so many of us that want to do something, right? And want to have a voice and make change in this world. And yet you don't really know where to start, or you kind of feel like it doesn't matter, right? Do I even have a say? Is there anything that I can actually do? And so I think that's powerful that you are hopefully making it easier, simpler, breaking it down, but specifically catering it to those that I feel like have the power to change the most in the world, which I think is moms, right? Because moms already, like, you have this passion to love your kids and to you're raising up this next generation. So then there's also that side of you that I mean, I'm not a mom, but I can see this in the moms around me where they want to change the world around to make it a better place for their kids as well, right? And so there's
Yeah, I
this
think
like,
when our eyes open up and like all of a sudden you think about your life, it's like, okay, realistically, we'd be pretty lucky to live a century. Just, I don't want to be macabre, but there's that. But then when you have kids, all of a sudden you're looking out like much farther. And it's oh my gosh, this is not the world that I wanted necessarily. So, yeah, I found that there's a lot of links to moms using that power, and as I lived through it, finding out that oddly our kids are uniquely good at training us in characteristics that make us good advocates. So I kind of want to get out there and tell moms that if you're feeling like you've lost your identity, because it happened to me, I was an engineer before, and it just so happened in my life, we can talk about it in more detail later, it made more sense for me to be a stay-at-home mom. So I was like, oh, I lost what I was before, and I didn't feel very powerful at all. I felt extremely vulnerable. I felt like I didn't have an impact in the world. So I want to tell moms that if you're feeling like I can't change the world because I'm a mom and I'm busy, no, it's like you can change the world, especially because of that part of you. So the book is for mothers and others. I've had other people talk about how they've found it useful, because I'm always talking about busy moms because we're doing other things, we're multitasking. Everybody's busy. So some other people like it just because I'm demystifying this mysterious process of talking to the government, and I'm making it very bite-sized and doable and time efficient.
yeah.
Mom and being a former engineer, it's my kids laugh about like efficiency is something that I'm always talking about. I'm like, your kids are like doing something, it's like, you don't want to tell them you're doing it wrong, but I'll be like, honey, that's pretty inefficient. So that's
Yeah.
a household joke with us.
Yeah, that's so good. I love that. I think that that is perfect to be able to bring that practicality into it of just here's some tangible things you can do. Here's the most efficient way with the least amount of time so that you can actually make a change. And I really want to hear more about what was your journey into this. So you said you started all of this in early motherhood when you're already transitioning, your identity is shifting, all of these things. Tell me a little bit about that time in your life and kind of what got you first into this.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time reflecting it, and I've decided that there was kind of a moment that was a spark. And you'd like to say that everything's all nice and linear and like this went to this, went to this, but I'll kind of boil it down. But that moment that was a spark for me was just days into being a mom. I was holding my baby, and something that I didn't know about myself at the time, nobody knows this about themselves, is that my milk doesn't come in right away. How would you ever know that about yourself?
Yeah.
Some people it's easy. For me, it was a struggle, and I was wanting to do everything right. Engineer, right? We want to do the process the correct
Efficient,
way.
right?
Yeah. And so I didn't want to use formula, and I was like, well, I must be doing this wrong. And I was trying for hours, and then there are benchmarks that your kid is supposed to make. She wasn't like thriving, and there's a little soft spot on the top of babies' heads that if they're not getting enough liquid, that it like sinks down. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. So it was Christmas Eve, and I'm like, there's no wet diapers, and what am I going to do? I call my doctor, and the doctor's like, the baby's not getting enough nutrients. Effectively, this is starving, so you need to go out to a drugstore, go to a convenience store and get some formula and feed them. And so my husband did that, And I was able to see firsthand what happens to turn a life around with just the really simple intervention of formula and clean water. Mix it together, folks. And the baby was like guzzling it down, like, you know, like you would chug something. And I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry that I was I was feeling very much like a failure. I was like, that was really dumb. I didn't know. But you don't know what you don't know. And, but that moment started me thinking as time went by, and that time of life and when you're up in the middle of the night is a great time for reflection. And I started thinking about moms around the world because a relative had gifted us a CD of like world lullabies. So I started thinking about all these other countries where you know, these lullabies were coming from, and some of the countries are low income countries, and I'm like, there are probably moms who sing these lullabies who don't have clean water even, so much less the formula. And then I started thinking about, well, all the things that I'm afraid about of trying to keep my baby alive are actually not real fears. That's just me being tired. But there are other moms around the world that these are actual real dangers, and is there something I can do about it? So this is where I was talking about how isn't it nice if everything could be very linear. Well, I had to stew around in that for a few years of, you know, not knowing what to do. And within 2 years I had my next child, and I would listen to things coming in on the radio about, you know, it's just the news is always full of the bad news, right? So tsunamis, there was a famine in Haiti, there was earthquake in Pakistan, and I just always felt like I don't have enough money to make a difference. I try to donate where I could, but I heard from some people at church, they held an event where you could write letters to Congress about nutrition, and it didn't take me very long. And they always had sample letters, and I figured out that when a baby had woken me up at night, and everybody else in the house was sleeping very well, and I was just like thinking about these world problems, I could write a letter in just like a couple of minutes and then mail it the next day. And then later I found out it's like, oh, you could email it. And then I found out, oh, you can leave messages for your member of Congress. They're not picking up at 2 a.m. You might as well leave them a message. Yeah. So I'm finding out all these like simple little ways, and it's not just me. I was connected to a bigger organization called Bread for the World with my church. So I was connected to thousands of other people writing these letters and making these phone calls and putting pressure on government to provide food for hungry Americans, as well as people who are living on less than $2 a day. So that's the nugget of how I got started with this work.
That's so interesting for you to have something where your child was struggling and you see them come through, and then that started to make you ponder and realize the struggles of the world and all of these things. And I think that's so real that you didn't go, oh, right now I'm going to take action, right? Because I think most of us, that's not how it works, right?
Sometimes when, you know, the story gets condensed, I sound like this like amazing super person that just like went from one thing to the next. But no, I had to like sit with that for a while. And I think right now, in this moment of American history, I think there are a lot of people sitting in their anxiety with uncertainty. And I'm not going to talk about it actually doesn't matter who you voted for. I think it is a factual statement to say that since we've had President Trump as a president before, something that is typical of his administration is a lot of confusion. There's a lot of news that comes fast and quickly, and people are not sure of what that means for them. And uncertainty means anxiety. And people wish they could know. It's like, what's going to happen? I wish I had a pipeline for somebody to tell me. I actually do, because I've spent years talking to Congress and building relationships with aides where I can pick up the phone and I can call an aide in Congress and go, what does it mean that we're pulling out of the World Health Organization? Or what does it mean that we're shutting down USAID? A lot of people don't have that, and yet it's available to us all as American citizens. Like, we don't usually hear about that. I never heard about that in like high school American government class. It was not presented to me.
I mean, I didn't know that. I think that we maybe have access to a lot more knowledge than we think we do. And unfortunately, maybe we're getting a lot of our knowledge from places that are skewed or are, you know, only giving part of the story, right? Which is like social media, or, you know, maybe we watch the news every once in a while. I feel like most people my age don't watch the news. And so at least I don't watch the news. I feel like it depresses me. So you know, and I think so. I think that's really cool to think that we actually can have access to these more solid points of information. So other than your book, what are some kind of tools or where do people start with this? If they're like, oh my gosh, I want more info, where do I start?
I mean, that's a great question, because my number one tip for people when they're first starting out is don't go it alone. You'll drive yourself crazy, and you don't even have access to a lot of this information from Washington. First, do a little thinking. Like when I was stewing around, I was thinking about like, what is important to me? What issues do I care about? And it wasn't like I was journaling to think about that. It was just became obvious, like, what keeps you up at night? What are you thinking about at 1 a.m? And when you decide what that is, and maybe it's gun violence because you've lost somebody, or you know, maybe it's health insurance because you're worried about that, or maybe it's food because you don't know where your next meal is coming from. Whatever that issue is, I can pretty much guarantee you that there is an advocacy organization for it. And I would really recommend one that is nonpartisan and reputable. So they have people that are sitting out on Capitol Hill that it's their jobs to decipher what's going on and then break it down for their volunteers with really timely actions. So you can go onto a website and see, like, most of them will have like a sample letter that you can customize for yourself and send it off. You could even have, I just think this is amazing because I'm going to tell everybody I'm 53, okay? And you probably figured it out because I have like kids in college now, but like that wasn't available to me at the time. We didn't use Zoom and social media and websites the way that we do now. Yes, we had websites back then, but we didn't use them how we do now. And so there are advocacy tools that can help you craft a letter to the editor to be published in a paper, which members of Congress love to be mentioned in the paper, and they like to see what their constituents are talking about, so you can get that extra impact. And these tools will allow you to see a template, change it up to have a bit of your story in it, and send it out, and it can take you like 20 minutes to do, 15 minutes. And man, the first time I had a letter to the editor in the paper, it was just my little tiny suburb in Illinois, but I felt about 10 feet tall, and I just couldn't believe it. It was just about, it was something really snappy, like, we should feed hungry people.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's like we laugh about it, but these things are actually not as obvious as you might think. Have people speaking out about.
Yeah, or it's easy to live in our own little bubbles and kind of forget that, you know, things outside of us, people are not getting what they need, or they're struggling, or I feel like it's either one or the other. You're either completely engrossed in all the pain of the world and crumbled by it, or you're numbing yourself to everything and you're staying in your bubble and you're trying to just survive. And I think that maybe we all got to go through both of those phases. So I don't think there's necessarily like you're a bad person if you're in the numbing phase or things like this, right? Because we are all just trying to live and experience the best that we can and help the best we can. But I'm curious for you if you feel like, other than, there's these tangible things they can do, but do you have any like words of love or advice for those that maybe are feeling in one of those two places?
Yeah, words of love. I love that because I think there's a lot of angry words out there right now. Like, especially if you spend, I'm actually spending less and less time on social media. I am, and I'll share those handles with you afterwards. But there are some pretty harsh words out there. And first of all, it's like I want to say that I'm not judgy to people who weren't engaged before, because if you're doing the math here, I had a whole bunch of life before I figured this out. Like I said, I didn't understand in high school that advocacy was part of this. So it doesn't come naturally. And I love that one of my mom friends, she once said, it's like, we didn't come out of the womb knowing how to advocate. So,
True.
don't beat yourself up for not knowing, these things. And like my kids are both activists. They're climate activists, which is kind of cool because it's not one of my main areas. Growing your own advocates from your womb is not an efficient way to multiply your impact, but it is a way.
Yeah, that's true.
But so they're an unusual case. But when I was 19, I was trying to figure out how to go to Disney World as much as possible because I was on the Disney World College program and I loved it down there, and Florida, fun in the sun. I didn't think about people in poverty ever. And, I'm the worst for it, but I got my act together later. And what's the phrase? Is it who said it? The when you know better, do better kind of thing.
Yeah.
So take this moment when there's more coming up. We didn't know about climate change 50 years ago. How were we supposed to take action on it? But we know better, so we can do better now. So as far as words of love of, inviting people in, I think that no matter what part of the political spectrum people are coming from, I want us all to be able to open our hearts to the struggles of people around us. Maybe they voted for Trump, maybe they didn't, but if they're experiencing poverty now, people who are hungry need to eat, no matter how they voted or where they are. And I think it is a delicate balance, I will say, of opening ourselves to that empathy and compassion and not just being hurt by an onslaught of news every day. So, so I want people to engage and find support and community. Community is super important. If I didn't have these organizations, my favorite advocacy organization is called Results. You can read about them at results.org. And I think that they have an approach of helping us know really detailed information, but also giving us resources for self-care, knowing that this is very tough work to do. When I was working with my church, it was Bread for the World, and that is also a place where, because I was going to a church, I had a built-in family to support me when I was doing that kind of thing. If you do this kind of work and try to go it alone, you'll probably burn out pretty quickly. So, find one of those organizations. And if you don't, come find me out on social media. I wrote my book to be like a warm, funny, inviting friend. Because I was getting a lot of questions about, especially in 2016, how I see you've been calling Congress and I don't know how to do it. And I wrote it in the way that I would write to my friends with fun stories about toddlers and taking them into congressional offices, that is a combination that will always end up with comedy. And I don't, it's not for the faint of heart. But somebody will end up laughing or crying, and it will always make a good story later. But I did this so that people can have it on their nightstand and like have that warm, empowering, you can do it feeling. So find it in the community around you, or come find me, and we'll work through it together.
Yeah, I think that's huge. That's such good advice of finding community, finding your people who value what you value, who are doing the good work. I had a podcast episode with someone else, another amazing woman who works in law, and she was talking about how when, I can't even remember the exact quote, but I know it is a quote, but she was saying like when, basically when the world is going down or shit hits the fan, like look for the helpers. And
oh yes, Fred Rogers quote.
Yeah. So I just botched the whole quote, but essentially.
No. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. The sentiment behind it, right, is like to zone in on the helpers, and I think that's exactly what you're saying too. Is like, for one, it gives you a place of where you can help, but also I think it gives you hope of seeing like there are good people in this world. There are people fighting the good fight and standing up for what they feel is right. And I think that sometimes we can get lost in that social media, especially back to that. It's like so shaming. It's so, if you're not advocating for literally every single thing in the world, then you're wrong in some way, right? And so there's something so amazing about you encouraging community, of saying like, you can find your people, you can see that there are people doing this good work. And like, I think that is the key to us to continuing to get to do the good work in the world. Because you're so right. If you're just trying to do it on your own, that's just not sustainable. You're going to burn out. You're going to feel like you're the only one doing it. And that's just draining work all in all. So we need each other.
And if we burn out, that means we can't do it at all. It's you got to put the oxygen mask on first, and then help other people. And what you were saying about finding that community within these big movements of people, there are smaller pockets. And I was interviewing a woman, there's an organization that I like called Clean Air Moms. And one thing that I thought was kind of special, that I reached out to this woman for an interview, is that within Clean Air Moms, there's a smaller group that they called themselves Eco Madres. And so they were, these Hispanic women that would they would meet in cafes and stuff like that, and they felt comfortable like with each other doing that. And what's the other one? Moms Rising, momsrising.org is another organization that I work with, and they have also a Latina portion that's called something a little bit different, and it's just escaping me right now because you're in Peru. I'm not a Spanish speaker. So but finding those your niche within the big groups is important too. You brought up that quote that I do love about Fred Rogers, look for the helpers, and the person that you interviewed. There's another great lobbying story about Mr. Rogers that if you have the time, I'd love to tell it, because it gets into something. I was talking earlier about how kids train us to be good advocates, and one of the ways that they do is that you need to explain things to children over and over and over, and maybe in a different way or just with repetition, but we become expert explainers. And this story about Mr. Rogers is that there was PBS, Public Broadcasting System, was in danger of losing from some federal funding. And so they sent Mr. Rogers up to the Hill to testify in favor of public television. And Mr. Rogers, you can look this up online, and it's in my book. There's like a link if you want to, but just Google it. You can see that Senate hearing, and Mr. Rogers is exactly like how he was on his show. That
That's so cute.
he didn't change his tone at all, and it wasn't that, he wasn't like a condescending, sing-songy kind of guy when he talked to his tiny audience.
He was just calm, right? So
Yeah.
calm and yeah.
And he just used very simple terms, and he even like shared the lyrics of his song. Like he described what his show was and what he meant to do with it, and he shared the lyrics to a song called "What to Do with the Mad That You Feel," which is just perfect for telling people on Capitol Hill like what they should do with the mad that they feel. Anyway, he got to the end of it, and the senator who was grilling him is like known as kind of a gruff guy, and you can see it at the beginning of the thing. He's like, "What do you got?" And at the end, he's like, "I think that's amazing. You just got your, $20 million or whatever." So we have this within us, not just moms, but other people, and sometimes it's difficult to keep a lid on it. But hey, it's difficult to raise your children and keep a lid on it. We can do this.
Yeah, I think that's that's an amazing story for one. I love that he showed up just totally as himself and was like,
Yeah.
let me teach to you basically adult kids here. But I think we forget that adults we are just big kids essentially. And a lot of those tools that, like you were saying, you use as a mom, this is explaining things in simple terms, explaining them multiple times, why they're important, accessing your emotions, all these things. All us adults think that we've got it figured out. We don't. We're still juggling those exact same problems and and so being able to use those same tools with adults, I think that's so good. And again, reminds what your whole message is, right? Like moms are so set up already to be doing this work because you're already doing that work every day with their little tiny humans that you talk to and that you're teaching and you're educating. That's so fun. That's a great story.
Yeah, you don't have to be a policy expert. When I go up there, here's the big secret is that you don't have to be a policy expert. All you have to do is show up as a constituent, as a voter, or by the way, you don't even have to be a citizen of the United States to necessarily do this work, because some of the most powerful stories that we've brought with are people who are here for some reason. They're not citizens, but their story of what's happening to their family in, let's say, Uganda or something like that is very compelling, and they can share that firsthand knowledge, even if they're going back later, but they're living in the district. So members of Congress should care about who's living within their bounds and who's voting for them. But you just have to show up and say, I live here and I care, and this is what I care about, and this is why. And all of your listeners, we were joking before, you were like, I'm just going to ask you about you. And I'm like, yeah, I'm an expert on myself.
Yeah, that's true.
We are all experts in ourselves and our own stories. So if you care about something, you are the number one prime, spokesperson for why you care about something. Nobody else can tell you why you care, just you. Mm-hmm. And if you share that story, or maybe you wanted to, like, here's me sitting at home. We talked about the earthquake in Pakistan or whatever. Or like, I remember a tsunami story that just broke my heart, that this guy he was being interviewed after a tsunami, and he had lost his child. Like the water had ripped it right out of his arms, and he was like, I'm looking for my child. She's missing a tooth. This is what she looks like. And I'm getting a little worked up thinking about this. But if we tell these stories, especially the ones that broke our hearts a little bit, we're, as moms, like, we tell stories all the time, and we're really good at it. And if our emotion shows, and if my voice shakes a little bit because of some emotion that I'm having, that's okay. And there have been stories that I shared, and the aides started tearing up a little bit. And I'm like, well, now we're both sitting here having a very human moment together. about something that we didn't know that we had in common. So yeah, the storytelling, if anything that you can do to build the relationship with your aides or members of Congress that tap into their humanity and shared values. This is a very tough thing to do in this moment in history, but it's a very important thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah, connecting with the humanity of it. And yeah, if you can connect with your own humanity, your own self, and what hits you deep, and share that and express that to someone else. That's power. And you're so right. I think stories change the world. And so when you can share your own story, or other, share even someone else's story that has, like you even sharing that story of that man and his daughter, which just like that's how we can connect with each other. That's how we can share what's important, is like that's what's woven through all of humanity and culture and all of that is stories, right? And so I think that's cool to point it to that, instead of being like, you need to have like all this legal jargon and you need to be able to do all this to have any sort of impact. We need those people, right? We need the people that have the legal jargon and they have, like that's important. But also, yeah, but also you don't have to be that. You can also just be human and connect through stories and do that and still have an impact, because we need everyone's little piece,
There's something right now happening that can illustrate this a little bit. That there's a program called PEPFAR. It stands for President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. I have to think about it a little bit. It's a long acronym. It was started when George W. Bush was a president as a response to the AIDS crisis, particularly in Africa. And so this has been going on for more than 20 years. And so that program is under USAID, which is, I don't know when this will, the news moves fast. So I don't know what's going to be happening when this podcast airs. But as of this today, USAID has been shut down, and PEPFAR is largely under that. So I can go up as I'm going to DC in a couple weeks, and I could go up and, as we frequently say when we go up there, if we talk about PEPFAR, we say 26 million lives have been saved by this program, and that's a big deal. But I could also tell a story, and I haven't told it in a while, so I may get myself in trouble here. But the broad strokes of the story were an activist that I met at a conference shared her own story that she was HIV positive and contracted AIDS, and she was a mother, and she was very sick, and her husband was told, well, you shouldn't spend money on her, you should spend your money on a coffin because she's to die. But through government funding from our country, and our country has inspired other countries to put into these programs as well. But because of something that happened from our country, she was able to get the drugs that she needed and make a full recovery and see her children grow up, become an AIDS activist herself, and stand in the podium talking to us. I can talk about her story that she graciously gave us permission to share. And that is more touching than just the big number. 26 million people is a big deal, but it doesn't, the aid the next day might be like, what was that number? I don't know, was that million or billion or, but they'll remember that story.
It's true. It doesn't connect, numbers don't connect with the heart, right? They can connect with the brain a little bit, right? You're like, 26 million, that's a big number. That's a lot of people. But what sticks with us is those things that connect to the heart, that make us feel something, right? And that's exactly what you're sharing there. That's powerful. And I love that not only did that save her life, but now she's hopefully having a ripple effect on more people, which are then, she said, share my story, which is having a ripple effect on more people. And that's just powerful. It's like this.
It blows your mind how far that goes. And
that's crazy.
there are stories about, this wonderful medical breakthrough that we have, that we can prevent mother to child HIV transmission, and that wasn't possible for a long time. And there's a camp in Minnesota. I just wrote a letter to the editor about this. We have such good news. This is a good news story. It's not about an individual, but in this country, we've solved that problem so well. There was a camp that was specifically for kids who were HIV positive, and it closed this year because there's not enough kids to go to it, because we solved that problem.
Wow, that's actually
I know, it takes a turn, right? You're like, oh no, they're closing the camp, and it's like, oh.
Like, really?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So, we had this success here, and, there's a bunch of people thinking, oh, well, we solved AIDS here a long time ago. We did not. It's still around. And, we can have those successes, and if we invest in it, we can have those stories happen all over the world, too. So, yeah, stories. We went way deep into that, but it's really important.
No, I think it is powerful. Something that I've been curious and wanting to ask you about is, I know we live in such a, like you said, confusing time. So there's a lot of information we're getting, or there's, a lot of very sensitive, a lot of very sensitive topics that are at the forefront, right? And things that people take very personally, right? Understandably so. And so what happens is, when someone disagrees with you, is there tends to be a lot of conflict, or, either you avoid conversations altogether with someone that disagrees with you because you're like, okay, well, I don't even know where to even start with that. Or it becomes something that's very volatile. And so I'm curious for you, we've talked a lot about how to advocate to Congress and, to the people doing the work up there. But what about just in our interpersonal relationships? Do you have any tips or how to handle that with someone who looks at the world differently than you?
That is a magic question. I may not be the expert in this area, but I'll just share, my own life experiences. There are people in my life that it's very difficult to talk to about these issues, and there are some family members that, that's especially painful, right? When it's your family. Mm-hmm. And what has worked for us sometimes is when it's just too difficult to do the typical, that's a stereotype, right? People go to Thanksgiving and crazy Uncle
Bob. That's where all the fights happen. Right over turkey and mashed potatoes, right?
Right. So my family has difficulty with this too. And one of the creative ways that we found around it is that I come from a family of crafters, of quilters. And so we sometimes do a quilting retreat. And we found that if we focus on the cooking and the quilting, and there's lots of conversation because we all have a different opinion on how we want to quilt. But that activity seems to bring us together for that time, and it helps us remind each other how much we do love each other. So when those painful things come up, we still have a common love that we're tapping into. That's just one story. It doesn't work perfectly all the time. I'm not going to come out here and say I have all the answers. We need a therapist to come out here and talk about that. But in another sense, for people who are not your family and things like that, is I learned this from, they call it deep canvassing. When you're out in election season, I hate door knocking. It's unfortunately still super effective, so you should do it. But I'm more of an introvert, and I don't like doing it. But when you're doing it, or doing phone calls, that's another thing. If you can keep your conversation, that's an especially charged one, right? Because you're actually have the politics at the forefront. But maybe it's somebody else that you're seeing at work or whatever. If you can keep the conversations on a values level instead of like the policy level. If you can keep your conversation based in like, let's say it's the mom at the library or something, if you can keep the conversation on how much you love your kids, if you can agree on that, and then the conversation can be easier if it turns to then it becomes nuanced. It's like, well, how are we loving our kids? Like the during COVID, it was like a whole thing, like masking or not masking. And there were moms that were like, I'm an infectious disease advocate. What do you think I was doing? I was masking. So that's not a secret to anybody, but so there were moms who wanted masking, and there were other ones that was like, my kid is, you know, being harmed by not being able to see people's faces. And guess what? That's probably true in the case of kids who are, you know, have are on are on the spectrum and need to see more cues or have trouble reading facial expressions anyway. So you take away this, and then it's just my eyes, and what are they going to do with that? Mm-hmm. So here's a case of two moms that have very real concerns, but if we're coming from a place of we actually care about and love our kids and want the best for them, that conversation can become a little easier.
Yeah. Oh, I love that example. That's such a good example because, yeah, you are sharing like, okay, we can say, all right, I disagree with you. You disagree with me, but we can agree on something, right? Which is we both love our kids and we're just trying to do the best that we can for our kids here. And yeah, that's a really good advice.
Territory, right? Like back, nobody knew anything at the beginning of COVID.
Yeah, and that was a crazy time, a messy time. Everyone, that's when I really feel like there was like the first like month where there was this like little bubble of peace where everyone agreed with each other. And we were all like, we're in this together, right? You saw the good of humanity. You're like, yes, let's rally together, all this. And then that month kind of waned. And then all of a sudden it was like, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. And that's when you really saw this split, right? And I had an interesting...
Science. We have different science, and
yes.
And we're learning things about the virus, so the science is changing, and now we're just all confused.
Totally. And I had an interesting perspective because I was living in San Diego at the time. So California's politics and all of that is one way, and my family was living in Idaho. And so I visited Idaho in 2021, and like complete different counterculture than the way that I was living in San Diego. And so that was also fascinating to see how like the culture in each part of the world and the way that wherever you lived, if you were making a choice, people were going to hate on you. And if you lived somewhere else and you were making a different choice or the same choice, people were going to hate on you. And it was just like, there was no winning. And I still feel like humans are just funny that way. We like to decide I'm right, you're wrong. And so I love your advice of saying, what can we agree on? What is something that we both value, right? And maybe we're perceiving it, our worldview is a little bit different in how we fulfill that value, but we can at least agree that there is something we both stand for. And yeah, that's what I'm always trying to get back to is like, we're all just doing our best here. Why we hate each other so much? Like, you know, it's like, also that's literally not the way to change someone to make a different choice, right? Is to hate them into submission. Yeah, that doesn't work. You can't hate someone you can't shame someone into making a better choice, right?
Yeah, imagine if I showed up in a congressional office, to bring it back to the advocacy thing. It's like, I think you're the worst and I think you're wrong. Will you sign on to this bill?
Yeah, like, you suck. Listen to what I have to say.
It just, you know, we keep coming back to this in the conversation that you know, people like to joke that the people on the other side are not human, but we are human, and we have to look at human nature when we're trying to convince somebody of another side. When you were talking about like different parts of the country, one of the most valuable things for me at the time that I was engaging with was there were Zoom calls that I would write for a blog called World Moms Network. a friend of mine had started it, and she was just amazing how she would network around, and she had moms from all over the world writing blogs about mom things, and it was fascinating to read people feeling similarly or differently, come from different parts of the world. But she had the idea of bringing us together during COVID on Zoom before we all started having Zoom fatigue and hated it. But those first ones were fascinating because you're in your news bubble and you're not like seeing other people because we were in isolation. And I would have this screen full of moms, and we would be comparing information about like, what is it like for you with COVID in the Philippines, and this woman's in Saudi Arabia, and that person's in Japan, and
Wow.
we're in different parts of the United States, and like how different governments handled it was crazy different and fascinating. And
Crazy.
yeah, and a lot of them were like, we feel so sorry for you in the US, and we're just like, well, I don't know, I thought it was good. What?
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, I feel like even the information we were getting, we're all receiving it differently. Then there's like the culture and the way it's getting translated. And but it even blew my mind that you think of the US as like we're one country, right? But I think people forget how big it is and how different culturally different places are. That like, yes, we're both American citizens, and also the way that the environment you're getting raised in is so different than the environment that person is getting raised in, and the messages they're receiving in school, even though it's all a public school system, can be completely different too. And I think that's just so wild. And hopefully like have a little compassion for that too, for some people that maybe believe a certain way that you're like, why the hell would you believe that? What is wrong with you? But then also have some compassion for like, okay, you don't know the soil that they were growing in, right? We are also influenced by that, as much as we want to say that we're not. Like, we're influenced by the water that's getting poured on us, and if we're a little plant, right? And the soil that we're growing in and all of that. And so people can only do so much with what they're given. And I think the work you're doing is amazing, because hopefully it's allowing people to get a little different nutrient in their soil, a little something, to hopefully grow and expand and become their fullest selves. Really good stuff.
I will just say this, wrapping up that part of the conversation, that one of the reasons that I wrote the book the way that I did, with voices of different moms who work on different issues. Like I said, I'm like, climate is not a specialty of mine, but I have moms who are working on that, or moms who don't look like me, or just economically have different struggles and stuff like that. So it's not just my voice. I wanted to bring in these other people that had different water poured on them when they were little. But the way it's written, the way it is we need more people in this movement. It was true 2 years ago, it was true 10 years ago, but it gets more and more true that we need more people working on more issues. And there are activists we talked earlier about burnout, that are burning out, and we need more people to come in and inspire and refresh and take over. We should be able to take a break. I talked to one of my older kid tends to like plow through a lot of things, and it's like, oh, this has to happen. It's like we should be able to build movements that where the community cares for each other, and there's enough of us that some of us can take breaks sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's important. So my book is an act of reaching out and trying to find more people to invite into the fold, because many hands that make light work, but right now all the work is heavy, so many more hands needed.
Well, I hope that whoever's listening to this episode, that maybe that will create some more hands and some more people getting involved, and also your book as well, that people can hopefully get their hands on something like that and realize that change is more tangible than they think, and feel inspired to start making some moves. So yeah, this has been such a cool conversation with you, Cynthia. I feel like I've gained a lot of knowledge and information, and I also just feel like getting to hear someone who feels so passionate about this and is making it so accessible is a gift. And so, yeah, thank you so much for our whole combo.
Thanks.
Yeah. Well, do you mind if I start to wrap up our episode and head into our rapid fire questions?
Yeah, I'm very curious about this part. Let's go.
Okay. So very important questions.
Not to think about it too much.
Yeah. They're not crazy. The first one I have is, if you could choose a superpower, what superpower would it be?
Oh, yeah. It's funny. I was asked this a couple of years ago, and I'll have to go and see if my answer has changed, because I kind of go back and forth between flight and invisibility. And I think right now, you know what? I'm going to say invisibility now, just because sometimes I feel like not being seen, and also I think it would just help me get around. But I actually, in that other podcast, I was in a different time when I was raising kids, and they were here, and I chose the power of multiplication of objects, because that you would always have like enough for all the kids, whatever it was. I want that toy. Well, boom, there's two, and you would always have enough to feed everyone. So isn't that a sweet thing? But I don't actually do that anymore. So I would just like to be invisible.
Okay, cool. Also, I feel like invisibility would allow you to like sneak into Congress and do all these things too, and really get that inside scoop.
Yeah, I need to hear this. I need to be sitting in that room and hearing what's happening.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I read a lot of comic books, so I probably spend more time thinking about those kind of questions than the average person. So
I love that. That's awesome.
there's Wonder Woman right there. There's Linda Carter.
Oh, see, there you go. Yeah,
There's
I
a
love
bunch of
it.
Wonder Woman there.
Okay, next question I have for you is, what is a go-to comfort meal for you?
Go-to comfort meal is probably my dad is Chinese by descent, and so like a Chinese pork roast.
That sounds delicious.
That's what we have always for Christmas Eve, but also at different times of the year, if we just need to feel that way.
Yeah.
It was the first meal I made in COVID isolation, so yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Oh my gosh, I could go for some of that right now. That sounds delicious. Okay, next question I have for you is, what are 3 books, movies, or podcasts that you want to recommend to the listeners?
I will say podcast first, just because I'm kind of enamored with it lately. It's not like interview style podcast like this, but NPR has a program called the Moth Radio Hour, and it's short stories, people telling short stories. They're like 5 minutes long, and they have to be first person and true, something that happened to them. So
Oh, cool.
it works out to dovetail beautifully in what we were talking about in the podcast about how we are wired for stories. And I had a dream come true a couple weeks ago that I drove up to Chicago in the hopes that I could tell a story on the moth, and I did get chosen out of what they call the Tote of Destiny. They draw names, and I told a story about a very special rescue dog that I had spent the day with, and
Cool.
and yeah, so I hope that it might be on the Moth Radio Hour sometime. But I just really recommend they're just bite-sized bits of humanity that come in story form.
I love that. That sounds so interesting. I'm definitely going to check that out.
Yeah. A book that I have read recently is called Playground, and I apologize that I don't remember the author, and it's not even in the room right now, but we could look it up.
I'll look it up, and I'll link it in the description. So anyone that is curious, so we can always message afterwards too to make sure I found the right one. So yeah.
Yeah, it is a fairly recent book, and it combines so many things together. There's a relationship of friendship that is struggled with. There's parts of it take place in a tiny island community that's threatened by global warming, and what happens when very wealthy people want to come and develop it, and the community actually votes on it democratically and even lets the children vote. So there's that
Wow.
part. And also just beautiful descriptions of undersea life. And that is a passion of mine, is an amateur passion of mine, is snorkeling and stuff. I'm from Minnesota. I've always lived in the middle of the country. I'm not by the ocean, so this is like a fantasy thing for me. And so the descriptions of scuba diving and snorkeling and the sea life is so vibrant and wonderful. So playground.
Cool. I love it.
And movie, I'm just gonna say Wicked all day long because I love musicals, and this is a musical for our time, and about self-empowerment and revolution. So
yeah, I can't wait to see it. I've been so wanting to watch it. Yeah. But living in Peru, it's a little tricky. It hasn't been in theaters around here, and then it's like $25 to rent online. But I am gonna rent it soon and watch it because I've been hearing only amazing things about it.
my husband was like, "Why was there a $20-something purchase for Wicked? Didn't you go see that with the kids?" I'm like, "Yeah, I want to own it. I'm gonna watch it repeatedly."
Yeah, I know. At this point, like, I might as well just buy it because it's $25 to buy or $20 to rent. Might as well just buy
Yeah,
it.
I just bought it, and if I watch it 10 times, which I easily will, I'll have made that money back. So
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Okay, and last question for you is, why do you feel it's important to be brave?
there's so many answers to that, but just given what we're talking about, I feel like maybe there's not the answer, so I'll give you an answer that ties into what we've been talking about, is that that being brave and stepping out of our comfort zone is the only possible way that change will happen, that changing things for the better, like in Wicked, changing things for good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so good. Well, thank you again, Cynthia, for being here. Where can people connect with you, or what else would you like to share?
I guess I'll share where to connect with me, because I'm always sharing things. Well, I'm trying not to engage in a lot of conversations on social media, like the hateful ones that we're talking about. I do like to amplify things that great advocacy organizations are doing, especially the ones that do a lot to empower their members. So on social media, my handle is usually at CCY Levin, CCYLEVIN, and I'm on Blue Sky, Twitter, Instagram, and then on Facebook, my full name, Cynthia Changyit Levin, Facebook and LinkedIn. But my website that can just get you to all that good stuff is www.changyit.com, and that just links to everything, including a place to sign up for my monthly newsletter, which lets you know a little bit about me and what I'm thinking and stuff like that, some different advocacy actions that I'm taking or where I'm speaking. But always, always, always included in that is some sort of easy action that you can take, that whether it's making a call to Congress or clicking a link to send an email or a sample letter to actually hand write, that will always be in the newsletter. I put that out every month.
So cool. I love that. I will definitely link all of that below in the description, so anyone that wants to connect with you or get access to your newsletter, which I'm definitely going to go sign up for after we get off this call, because I would love that.
Yeah, the book you can get on Amazon or anywhere books are sold. You can order it.
Perfect.
If you'd like an
I'll book
autograph,
that too.
Yeah, if you want an autograph copy, you can get it off my website and I'll send it to you. I don't know how to get it to Peru though necessarily. Maybe Amazon's better for that.
That might be a little tricky. I can always ship it to my parents' house and get it later, you know?
There you go.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Well, thank you again, Cynthia. This was so enlightening and such a cool conversation. Super thankful for it. And I have so much love for you and what you're doing in the world. Mwah.
Go find some more brave bitches. I want to hear them too.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much for listening and watching this episode of the Brave Bitches podcast. If you like what you saw, please like, comment, share, review, all that good stuff. Also follow me on Instagram at Hannah Soul Marie or at Brave Bitches without the I for some behind the scenes look and clips from the episode. Again, thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.